I always get
Yeah,
notified at a
they
different time.
have to.
Do you realize that every one of these episodes begins with, "Oh, I just didn't get notified."
It's you
Oh, I know.
complained about it.
I'm just bitching. Okay, let me bitch. Anyway. Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
I
Good
think.
morning, everybody.
How come it says my video was private?
It shouldn't say that.
Did you ban me? Am I
Well,
banned?
mine's saying private too. What? That shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be private.
Yeah.
Let's just go on another one and see what's going on with it.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't know.
Oh, that's weird.
I didn't realize we were so elite, Mary.
Okay, it should be fine now.
What'd you do to it? Did you spill
I think
coffee on the keyboard again?
no, I don't know what's going on with it.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so all right. Well, I'll take your word for it that we're okay. I guess it's okay.
Yeah, it shouldn't be
Uh,
private. We'll find out.
you probably blocked me. Well,
Um,
it's just us hanging out. So what's going on? What's
hey Bill,
happening?
hey Barbara.
Oh, we are on. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Well, good morning. Good morning to you, Fincheru. What's going on with you?
How much?
You seem disheveled today.
I'm not.
It's weird we get to have a Friday night out and you are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed today. So well done. Well done by
There's
you.
someone on here called the ghost of Howard's right arm,
That's a
and
real
it's
thing.
not me.
Oh God, can you imagine that? Oh,
Not
poor
me.
Otis. Poor Otis. He didn't make it. He didn't make it.
No, no.
Anyway, I'll get going here a little bit. Get the things going. Another looks like another cloudy and crispy friggin' winter day here in God's country, Massachusetts. So,
Mhm.
which I don't know if you know this, Mary, but there's some good history here, not just in Boston.
There is. I would agree. Lots of good history people from here too. Good morning,
Definitely,
Autumn.
definitely. Hey, anyway, so yeah, so that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. We're ready to go again. We didn't do this last week. We were down in God's country last week in Gettysburg
Yep.
doing some fun stuff, um and it's pretty cool. What's good about a lot of these places, especially any of these battlefields, it's the places you can kind of go to these seminars. We'll talk
Yeah.
about this. We'll talk about this here in a little while. But that seminar we went to last week, that was the combination of the Battle of Gettysburg podcast and the seminar. Did you just get dark in the background there? You just shut. What's going on here? Would you change
No,
your
no, I
background in the
just
middle?
yeah, I just changed my background to
Wow, look at you on the fly, huh?
Mosby.
On the fly.
Morning,
But anyway,
Miranda. Morning, AQ. Morning,
hey, what's
Scott.
going on?
Morning, Frank. Frank is
Definitely
tuning in from Perth.
Perth, Washington.
Really? Okay, you just got back with like I thought he was in Australia, but maybe he's not there anymore. Morning,
Or maybe
Jim.
it says Perth. It says WA. But in any
Morning,
case,
Glow Jam.
yeah,
Frank. Oh,
yeah.
Frank says 160th of Dahlgren's raid.
Oh, that's a cool. We did an episode on Ulrich Dahlgren, and that's a fascinating story. That's a great story. He's a very underrated. I don't want to say badass because he was kind of a dick. I
Yep.
mean, he hanged that slave really for no reason. He thought he was a rebel spy,
Yeah.
and all of his men are saying no, he's not. Stop it. They hanged him anyway, and he got his just desserts, as they say.
Yeah.
But he was a raider. He was almost like a dollar store Mosby on the Union side, if you think
Yeah.
about it.
Dollar
He was
store
someone.
Mosby.
Well, he was. I mean, he was.
Yeah.
He was someone who wasn't a thinker like Mosby, but he also was. Mosby wasn't a killer like that anyway. But it's. But anyway, that's the truth about him. So yeah, that's a good thing. They're talking about Ulrich Dahlgren. I didn't think about him today, but he's a fascinating study though. A lot of these people are, and
Yeah.
in once you study this history of the American Civil War, and you get past the A list, the Beyonce, Jay-Z
Yeah.
level celebrity of the Civil War, and you get down to the nitty gritty. That's where the rubber hits the road, and we've said this a million times, all the
Yeah.
time. That's
Morning,
what's
Jaron.
cool about it. Hey, anyway,
But yeah, we were in Gettysburg last weekend for the Seminary Ridge event, which this is their third year doing it, I think.
yeah,
So they have it in one of the buildings at the Seminary Ridge Museum, which is
it's
really
pretty cool thing
awesome.
here.
And then
Mhm.
like they have like there's like a 2 hour break for lunch. So it gives you the chance to go over and look in the museum. We actually went up in the cupola, but they let us keep our they give you like a kind of a voucher to come back and do a cupola tour, which is
Yeah.
included with the price of the seminar, which is really cool. Morning, Tammy. So anyway, that was an all day thing. Started at 9, ended just after 5. There was 6 presentations. They were all really, really good. Learned a lot. It's really like Jim Hessler started us off with a talk about Dan Sickles. And then Stu Dempsey talked about oh God, what did he talk about? Kind of like just
Like and the whole point of the seminar was the follow up from Gettysburg, and it wasn't just like when we went into
it wasn't just
the
retreat. It was other stuff too.
Right. It wasn't just the retreat. And I thought going into it, it was going to be about the retreat. It was going to be about Monterey Pass and Williamsport and a little bit. And I think there was a sort of supposition that was going to happen. But I liked it because you had Eric Lindblad talk about the great Arthur Fremantle, which
that was cool.
Someone was near and dear to my heart.
Yeah,
is Fremantle, and it's fascinating how. And I'm glad Eric brought up the fact that the way he was portrayed in the movie was completely different than it was portrayed in real life.
You mean the movie didn't get something right?
He's walking around with a teacup all the time and had this aloofness to him. And if you watch the movie, you're like, how the hell is this guy at this high level soldier?
Yeah.
But the real Arthur Fremantle was a badass. I mean, he was. And if you read his book, he's got his 3 months in the Southern States, which is a fantastic read. And there's another book about it too. But what's neat about Fremantle is how he got in and how he got out. And if you look at the whole picture of Arthur Fremantle, it's kind of like 10 of our episodes all rolled into one.
Yeah.
It talks about the blockade, about going through Nassau, how coming in from England. When we did the thing with Rose, it talked about how the whole Gettysburg. It talked about the West. It was how it got into all the way to the Northeast. Talked about the draft riots that he found himself a part of. Mary, people don't realize that Fremantle got stuck in the middle of the draft riots.
Yeah,
with his teacup walking around.
God, that's so. I got to take a pause for a second because our friends at Civil War Trails are on here. So good morning to them.
Yeah, we saw Drew. We saw him on the thing the other day with with Mikowski.
Emerging Civil War did a panel the other night, which was really, really well done. Just kind of about the end of like Civil War times. Now, I think they are going digital, but still, like the print is done, which is really sad for the Civil War community. That kind of magazines are on the wayside. But it was a really great discussion just about.
Yeah.
What I like that they touched on is the fact that young people are most definitely into the Civil War, and that's what our friend MJ can attest to that. Because she interacts with kids all the time with her living history group, Confederation of Union Generals. I hope I got that right. I'm still early morning. I haven't been waiting for very long.
Coog, just say Coog.
Coog, yes.
Coog. Short for cougar. Hey now. But the thing.
No, but you're right. Civil War Trails is a great group.
You're right though, because you look at some when I was growing up back in the day, but it was Ed Bars, it was James McPherson, it was people like that. But now you're looking at this new phase of educators and historians who are catering more towards the younger people, and so people like Civil War Trails, obviously, people like Chris Muskowski, like Gary Edelman, all the people that everybody knows, but that's this generation's version of the McPherson, the Bars, the Fonz, the Coddingtons of the world. And what's great about it is that they teach and they put their history out there in a way that's much more relatable to the younger person. And a lot of these people remind me of the professors and high school teachers I had growing up, which lit my fuse with history, because if you make it exciting and you make it appropriate to today's day, it becomes much more relatable. And that's what's cool about all these people. And it's funny, Civil War Trails, and we've been riding their trails literally and figuratively here for a while. And we always, I always, I've said this before, I'll say it again, is, we go down to Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, way more than any normal human should. I mean, we do, right? But when you see that first Civil War Trail sign, isn't it kind of like a welcome home sign in a way?
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Like you're driving down 15 and you see a Civil War Trail sign and it's like, oh man, I'm back. That's what's cool about it.
Yeah, and you see, like you'll sometimes go somewhere again, and there'll be a new Civil War sign from Civil War Trails, and you've got to do the sign selfie with it. That's one thing I love about their social media is the sign selfie gets people interacting with the history, and it shows like the really cool signs. They said, oh, you're too kind. We were here this morning because you two energized us. Keep going. Well, thank you. We feel the same about you guys too.
No, I mean it's great, but they do great work. I mean, you see, you go follow their Facebook, you follow their Twitter, or all their stuff that they do, and you see Drew and the gang, they're up to their knees in mud and they're putting some
Yeah.
sign together and they're sitting there and it's like, man, it's one thing to sit and read a book, in front of in your big mahogany, living
With your
room with all the books
smoking
behind
jacket
you
on.
with your velvet jacket, your pipe, right? It's another thing to get in the weeds, right? And
Yeah.
get in there and actually put this out here because you know something? Somebody someday is going to drive down this road and they're going to see this. They've got a
Yeah.
sign in the middle of a swamp.
Yeah.
And so you can go up there and read this. And it's so, and I've, we do a lot of the selfie pictures with these things, right?
Yeah.
And there's been so many times we've been in places like Winchester or all these places where someone's reading a sign and it's a young kid and they'll read the
Yep.
Civil War trails and they always say the same thing. Oh, that's cool. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Well, they
Maybe,
tell like the more
but
personal side of the history.
maybe that person reading that sign is the next person who's going to get the bug, this history bug, who's going to
Yeah.
continue to study it. So
Yeah.
that's why it's when you look at the people who do this, it's such a huge tangled web of people who hit people at different angles, which is really
Yeah.
cool. You know,
Our conciliary Gentili's on here. Apparently he's wearing the velvet jacket. He's like, how
he
did you know what I was wearing?
he probably does.
With his bubble, he probably has a bubble pipe.
He has that classic the author at home pose, um
Yeah.
but no, but we'll that's what's cool about it though, is a lot of the people do this. You mentioned MJ shows a little history, and Scoring does his BMI thing, which we're going
Yeah.
to be a part of, Mary. I don't know if you
We
know
are.
this, but we're going to be
Cedar
doing the
Creek.
Cedar Creek reenactment 160. Your ass is going to be in a tent.
Yep.
you
I
know
like that. Yeah, MJ says it's the best and a true pleasure to engage with the younger people and to foster the interest of their history. Autumn mentions that she's taking her nieces to Gettysburg this summer. They're 13 and 16, and they know nothing about the battle. So she's looking. I know Autumn knows her stuff about Civil War, so that's really cool. She gets to introduce her nieces to it, so that's really awesome.
that's what's cool about it, is there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And
Yeah.
and what was great about the thing we were on the other night, is they're talking about the demise of the news, the magazine,
Yeah.
but it's not really going away. It's more of a digital thing. But
Yeah.
there was something cool about getting that and reading it and seeing the
Yeah.
pictures, and because I've never read an ebook. I've always read the physical.
No,
I like
I've
this. I like
read
this.
like some of my textbooks, unfortunately, are only available in ebook format, but that's the way academia is going. Sometimes it's like the only option to get one. And if you want it right away, like you have to get it via ebook because the print
Right.
copy is just not available from the local library or whatever. Um, and I think like I don't know. It's sad that it's going away, but the panel discussion was really good. I hope they get them all together again. I think like more needs to be said about the younger generation in the Civil War because like, yeah, there are a few out there that say like younger people aren't into it. And it's like that clearly was not the opinion the other night on that panel, and it's not our opinion. I know it's not MJ's opinion. Like younger people are into it. They're just engaging with it a different way that we don't always
Yeah.
see.
Well, people
Um,
learn differently now. I mean, you look back, but when we were in school, back when the Earth was cooling a million years ago, people you were taught a different way. When
yeah.
they rolled in the big TV, you
Oh
were in
yeah.
for it that day. I was
I
like,
was like,
"Ooh,
this
here
is
we
gonna be a
go!"
good afternoon,
Right?
the TV and the
But
VCR.
now it's much more visual. It's much
Mhm.
more things like that. And that's what's cool about it, though, is because you can go out and you can see these things, and you can go onto YouTube and
Yep.
you can watch presentations, and you can watch ranger walks, and you can watch guide stuff, and you can watch a lot of these panel things which we didn't have access to.
Yeah, we didn't have access to like, roundtables. Like for years, I couldn't join a roundtable. There was one in Toronto, but there was obviously it's me and like like one of the local history teachers that was into the Civil War in my area. We couldn't obviously not going to start a roundtable, but
Yeah.
like there was one in Toronto I thought of joining once I could drive, but like I never did because they only met like once a month and it was on like a I don't know, really obscure time. But then COVID hits and all of a sudden like you can go to these Civil War roundtable meetings. Like we're part of a Civil War roundtable in Chattanooga, which is really awesome. And it's great that there's these virtual options. And I understand that not all institutions and roundtables can do that. They can't
Yeah.
afford the technology, or it's a matter of they don't have the setup for it. And that I completely understand.
Well, and that you also have to roll with the times a little bit too.
Yeah.
I haven't read. I mean, you get the New York Times delivered every day. here at the and you
Wall
because you think
Street.
you Wall Street Journal because you think you're all highfalutin. You just do it for the crossword puzzle,
It's
right?
my textbook
But
for my
I know,
class.
but I haven't read an actual physical newspaper in a while. I read a lot of online stuff, but that's just the reality because it's just it is what it is. But it was good though because bringing us back to last week's seminar, it brings a lot of people out, and I would say that seminar was probably the ages ranged from probably I don't know mid-30s to dead as far as the age. I mean, there was some older people there, but everybody there was enthralled and very, from when Hessler began his talk on Sickles to when Jody finished up her talk on Maryland at the end.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody stayed. There was a few
Yeah.
people, there was a few stragglers who left, but for the most part, it was a long day. But with something like that, it's an apt audience, right?
Yeah.
Everyone there is there because they want to be there.
Yeah.
That was cool. I thought it was cool.
Oh, it was really good. Really enjoyed it. They did offer a virtual option, which there was 115 people that tuned in virtually. I think there was even a couple from Ireland, and I think Colleen, who comes on our roundtables, I think he was one of them.
Oh, I'm sure he was. I mean,
Which is
I don't know
pretty cool.
I don't think Colleen sleeps,
No, I don't think he does either.
because he goes on our roundtables, and I think it's like 6 o'clock here. It's probably like 1 o'clock in the morning in Ireland. I don't know. For all I
Midnight.
know.
It depends on like if we're daylight savings time or not. But I
Yeah.
know he's doing like his big tour over here too. Like he's going to all these different battlefields and
He's going to Franklin.
That's really cool.
He's going to see our friend Joe,
Oh, nice.
And I told him he needs to bring an Emerson Updike t-shirt.
Oh God.
Get all Joe going. I saw Joe get all riled up on social media this week.
I don't blame him for that. I was in Joe's corner on that.
Well, it's just something.
God, that was really something.
Yeah.
Gentili mentions it's really expensive to print magazines these days, so it's sad but smart move to go digital, and I understand that.
Well, you're probably going to get more eyeballs anyway, because
Mm-hmm.
you can still charge. You can still charge for digital, obviously. But at the end of the day, it's more, you're going to get more people if you do that.
Yeah.
So it's sad that the actual physical paper is going away, but it's not by no means the demise of it. It's just a different. You got to roll with the times a little bit.
It's just a different and the other thing too that I tell people is that local libraries, they are, unfortunately, because of the demise of so many magazines, they're switching to digital. If you have the Libby app, or I'm not sure if Hoopla does magazines or not, but any of those, you can get these magazines through your local library as well, which is, they have them right away. Like I get notified when the new issue of I'm subscribed to all the Savour magazines from that Plymouth library offers. So I get notified when the new one comes out. It's not the idea. Like I prefer like holding a book or magazine to read it, but it'll do. I'll adapt.
No, it's true. That's true. Yeah, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It'll be nice to record again. We're in March now. You know what that means, Mary? It's St. Patty's Day's time. So we'll be recording our episode on the Irish Brigade this Friday, and that's one of the popular ones up there with the not being confused with the Iron Brigade.
Yeah.
Right. And catch ourselves saying that, but that history is just fantastic too, and we've kind of delved into the Irish and the Civil War off and on now for a while, but which is really surprised we haven't done one on the Irish Brigade, because when you look at their history and you look at the populations, I mean, we've talked before that there are more people of Irish descent in Boston than Ireland overall.
Yeah.
In 1860, 26% of the Boston population was Irish. 25% of New York City was Irish, and it was 18% Philadelphia was Irish. So it's no surprise that you're going to see troops from these areas all coming together. When you look at, everyone likes to talk about Thomas Marr and Kelly, but the guy to really study is Michael Corcoran. And we'll talk a lot about
I've heard of him. Yeah, obviously heard of him.
Michael Corcoran's a fascinating guy. This is a dude who was a shitster in Ireland, wanting to fight the British. And he comes over here. Basically, he comes over to the United States, just like Thomas Marr, where you can either go to jail or you can leave the country, and they chose to leave the country. He comes out here to New York City, where the Irish are hated because they're very pro-democratic. They were not abolitionists because, of course, they're afraid that if slavery ends, they're going to be in competition with freed slaves for their dock jobs, and that's a real fear. And the Irish were hated just as much as anybody else. And you look at the Republican Party, pro-abolition, very nativist too, the know-nothings, right?
Yep.
Where they don't like the idea of foreigners coming over here. So obviously things have really changed, but
Yeah.
that's how it really works. And so now you have a guy like a Michael Corcoran who
Yep.
he's put in charge of the 69th New York militia, and it's a bunch of Irish guys. Just you can only imagine the guys who hang out
Yep.
at the L Street Tavern down here, and they end up when the war happens, they're going to basically put a regiment together,
Yep.
and they're going to be one of the hardest fighting guys, and they're under Sherman in
Hmm.
Bull Run, and
Yeah.
Corcoran gets his ass caught. And he disappears, and Thomas Marr takes over. What's funny about Michael Corcoran is in if you study him, and I know I think we talked about him with
Yep.
Gentili in Gettysburg one time. Maybe I don't know who I think but he dies by falling off of a horse of all things.
Yep.
Well, he gets. Do you know where he actually physically dies? Is the Gunnell House in Fairfax, the same house that Stoughton got back by Mosby. He died in that house.
Yeah, that's what Gentili was just saying, is he
Yeah.
died down
So
the street
so
from where he
so
is.
so it's so it's so he, there's so many cool stories about a guy like him. And then you look at they obviously they make their chops. I know we'll do the episode later, but they make their chops on obviously the Sunken Road in Antietam. But then Fredericksburg, obviously, they really do. And they continue all the way along. They're fighting at Chancellorsville, the Chancellor House, and they're one of the regiments there with the 88th New York and the 28th Massachusetts. They're there watching these 11th Corps troops come running by at the O.O. Howard 5K down the Plank Road, right? And then they end up, at Gettysburg, and people associate the Irish Brigade, with Gettysburg and
Yep.
with all that stuff. But really, it's Fredericksburg and in Antietam where they really make their chops, and then they
Yeah.
kind of fizzle away. Funny thing about the 69th New York, they're still active today in today's military.
That's really cool.
So we'll talk a lot about that, and that's going to be an appropriate episode.
Yeah, that's
But
going to be.
Michael Corcoran, he's a fascinating guy. He's part of that Fenian Brotherhood, which
Mhm.
you guys love so much up there in Ontario,
Oh my God.
right?
Yeah. So the thing, I know people probably heard me tell this story before, but my hometown of Goderich has cannons. You've seen them. They're
Yeah.
overlooking the lake. And my grandmother, we would often go for drives and stuff with my grandpa. And I asked her one day, I was like 4. I asked her one day, I said, why are there cannons at the lake? And she said, they're to protect us from the Fenians so they don't try and do a raid here. And I asked her who the Fenians were, and she told me the whole story. And the funny thing is about the
Well, I can imagine
Fenians,
the version you must have about the Fenians from her.
that
They're
was a good,
monsters. They
it was,
breathe
oh, it was a
fire.
good one. It was,
They eat children.
which is funny because my grandmother is mostly Irish,
Yeah.
born in Canada, but she had a lot of Irish ancestry. But then, as it turns out, William Sherman, General Sherman, visited Goderich in 1866. And one of the things that he did when he visited Goderich was to come over and say, don't worry, we're not going to, basically say, first of all, America's not going to invade you because we were on the chopping block, as kind of a thing that you guys were like, well, Britain, you need to pay us back. And they're like, have Canada. And so there was worries of the Fenians coming up here and invading, raiding, whatever. And Sherman came and gave a speech in my hometown just saying we're not going to do that shit. Don't worry. We have your back. So he arrived in Goderich Harbor in 1866. And that's, I think, where she got that story from, because it was her generation. It was a very well-known story that Sherman had visited the town. And we saw the house where he stayed.
We saw the Sherman tree.
Yep, there's the Sherman tree. There's
a piece of wood we found on the ground next to it somewhere around here.
Yeah.
But no, but it's just that whole people tend to focus obviously on American history, and that's obviously why, because that's where we are. But when you look at how many Irish would have come over here, and a lot of their people, just like the Germans, but especially the Irish, came because this was their training ground.
Mhm.
We're going to come here, and there's a great quote. That I think it was Corcoran. So it was a Corcoran or Marr. I think it might have been Corcoran, where he basically said, I'm paraphrasing, that if 10 Irishmen fight and only one survives in the Civil War, but goes back to Ireland to teach how to fight, then it's worth it. It's worth the 9 deaths. That's basically what he was saying. But that's what it was to come over here, learn to fight, especially officers, then go back overseas again to continue their fight against England. And that was really what it was, because when you look at this, the average person, you're going to sit there and say, well, if the Irish are hated so much in this country, Why the hell would they fight for it?
Yeah.
Right. And you had some Irish in the South too. You was Irish troops in the South, obviously. At
Yeah.
Fredericksburg, they're going mano a mano, or
Yeah.
shamrock a shamrock, as they say, right?
That was a
It,
great round table one night. Remember when Ryan was talking about that in the
oh
round
yeah.
table?
Oh yeah. It's like talking to you on a Friday night. But the thing about it was you look at this because a lot of them, even though the South was aligned with England and they hated England,
Yeah.
the South represented that revolutionary rebellion fight
Hmm.
that they were attracted to too. So you had them on both sides. We talked about Claiborne.
Yeah.
Now he didn't go to the South for that reason. He went there for different reasons,
Yeah.
but he ended up fighting obviously for the Confederacy. And his whole thing was to fight for his new home country. He
Yeah.
wasn't going to go back to the old country and fight. But when you look at why the Irish fought, how they fought, and how hard they fought,
Yeah.
they lost. I think it was 6 flags at Antietam, just
Hmm.
captured, shot to hell.
Yeah.
And so what Marr does, he gives them all Irish sprigs to put in their hats because they had no flags left.
Yeah.
So follow the guy with the green in his hat to go up the hill. They got to within 30 feet of that wall. 30 feet.
Yeah.
And just to show how the balls you have
Hmm.
to do that. um it's a fascinating study, especially when
Yeah.
you're fighting for a country that hates you, that I don't want to say you don't care about, because that's probably simplistic, but you're fighting for an experience.
Yeah.
It's very unique to American history to do that.
Yeah.
But the Union's glad they had them, I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah. Like, and is it Gentili mentions the thing you talked about with the Fenians, that they were using the war to get battle experience.
Yeah.
They didn't realize how long and bloody the war was going to be.
Well, they're sitting. There's just so listen. So they're sitting around. They join up. Corcoran 69th New York. They sign up. They go to Fort Corcoran. Okay,
Yeah.
that's where they go, and they all sign 30, basically 90-day papers.
Yeah.
That's all they sign, and they're sitting around. Who the hell knows? Looking for Lucky Charms or something. At this Fort Corcoran, by the way, is just south of where the modern Lee Highway is. So this is a little irony for you, right?
Yeah.
It's over Arlington, Virginia, right now. What's left of it anyway. But Lincoln's like, could you guys fight because you're going to run out of papers? They're going to run out of time. They fight a bull run,
Yeah.
and most of the 69 takes off. The hell with this.
Yeah.
They go back home. So they have to. Corcoran's got to recruit a whole new regiment now.
Hmm.
And then he gets incorporated. What's funny too is you look at the politics. Is they end up so Corcoran is going to end up with Marr trying to bring in a whole brigade.
Yeah.
Like we said before, the 29th Mass ends up being which is the only non-Irish. Somehow
Yeah.
they get a regiment of guys in Boston who aren't Irish. I don't know how the hell they pull that one off. But eventually it turns out the 28th Mass, and with 88th, the 69th, and so Corcoran and Marr want to put together this Irish brigade.
Hmm.
And Lincoln's like, well, I don't know if I want to have a whole brigade of Irish, because that doesn't sound like that's going to end well. But especially by an Irish leader. So who they put in charge? James Shields. James Shields was born in Ireland, but he was an American. He'd been here earlier. And so now you have these Irish regiments who are going to be commanded by an American. And that in turn too well reminds me a lot about Franz Siegel and your boy Howard with the Germans. Think about it, right?
Yeah.
But James Shields, the funny part about James Shields, this is the guy in Springfield who, as a young attorney, was getting hate mail.
Yeah.
From a woman, kind of like Silence Dogood.
Yeah.
He's an attorney. He ends up finding out who's writing these letters, challenging him to a duel. You know who that person was?
It was Abraham Lincoln.
It was Lincoln. And so it's funny, then you fast forward 20 years, Lincoln appoints James Shields to cover the Irish Brigade. It doesn't really turn the machinations are a little bit different.
Yeah.
But it just shows that in the heat of the war, the anti-Irish sentiment is still there, and it's always there.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some good talk here about Miranda mentioned she's got a Confederate Sons of Erin flag.
Cool.
Frank said, imagine if Claiborne stayed in Ohio, could he have led the Irish Brigade? That's a good question. Because he was in Cincinnati. I don't know what the Irish population was in Cincinnati, but odds are he would have fought in the Western Theater, because I just say that because Lytle was from Cincinnati. he fights in the Western Theater. Lytle unfortunately gets killed at Chickamauga.
Right.
Sickles goes to Sickles' Lake, said Claiborne probably would have lived because Hood sent him to death in anger and a stupid order.
Yeah, well, we talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
And then later in the month, we're going to be doing a separate episode on just Patrick Claiborne.
Yeah.
So we're going to be doing a Irish theme in March with two episodes.
Covering both sides. Our Irish Brigade episode will cover the Union side.
You can't cover both sides.
And Claiborne is our Confederate episode.
It's fun though. It's fun when you study. I mean, I like to look at the history of the cool aspects. I like the fact that James Walker wanted to duel Stonewall Jackson when he was at VMI. You got Shields wants to duel Lincoln in 1842. Those are the stories that I just think are cool about history. Is that you can look back at how things could have changed.
Yeah.
But it's just how it's like how Lincoln, especially with the Shields thing, how that must have gone. I know they talk. Shields fought Mexico. He did a lot of things out of Illinois, but fascinating guy to put in charge of that brigade. At the beginning.
And Lincoln also did not like to talk about it.
Can you? And by the way, can you imagine Michael Corcoran reporting to Sherman?
Oh God.
I mean, and the 69 fought very well.
Yeah.
Against Louisianans first and against the Virginians over at the Henry Hill House. And they fought their asses off. They finally got pushed back. But these are guys who, unlike a lot of the other soldiers, I mean, the thing about the Irish, not to be stereotypical, is they fight. They fight, right? I mean, Rescue Me, right? The TV show.
Oh, yeah.
Tommy Gavin, that's every Irish soldier.
Oh, yeah. Tommy Gavin is amazing.
But that's how it was. And so they're up there and they're fighting, but they get pushed back. Corcoran's going to get captured. There's a great picture if you Google it. You can see Corcoran and all the men sitting at Libby. They're all just sitting around. It's like the only picture from Libby I've seen, with a whole, almost a full regiment.
Yeah.
And then you bring up Mar. Some people pronounce it Mahar. You hear it different.
I used to pronounce it wrong.
Right? And you say meager.
I know.
Meager used to say. But it's fun because and he's another guy who faced exile from Ireland. He comes over here and he's like, oh fucking Jesus, that's just the way he is. And they proved themselves to be probably the hardest fighting foreigners by far, fighting for the American. Not the Germans, Mary, not the 11th Corps.
Well, Jaron mentions too, everyone is Irish on St. Patty's Days except the Polish. We're still Polish. He mentions Krzyzanowski? I can't say his name.
Krzyzanowski.
We talked Stu Dempsey. We saw him talk last week. He actually went to Chryz's hometown in Poland and asked people how to pronounce his name. I just want to say hi to Ski. He's on his way to Gettysburg and a Fourscore afternoon. He just popped on here.
Oh yeah, I wish we could have gone this weekend. It's just tough. I got other stuff to do this afternoon. I got to deal with on my other side of life here, and then but yeah, we were just there last weekend. It's too bad we couldn't have got together last weekend. I know the Sammys are down there doing their thing. It would have been nice to catch up with them, but unfortunately, life is what it is. So, but hopefully they have a good time. Hopefully they do.
Yep. Well, I've got my Fourscore hoodie on today.
Ski, you have to say hi to Caitlin and Diane for me over at the Fourscore. Tell them the revolution lives. They'll know what I mean. But no, that's pretty cool though. But still, if you look at the thing, what's interesting too is, and this is, I mean, people know this, people on this know this, but the average person doesn't, is the fact that Corcoran, he wanted his men to fight with those smoothbores.
Yeah. Because
he didn't want to give the false protection of being able to fire a rifle musket from a distance. He wanted them to get in their faces. So when you look at specifically Gettysburg, they're fighting with smoothbores against G.T. Anderson, remnants of the South Carolinians and all this stuff too. But they're getting right in their faces, and the Irish Brigade ran out of ammunition at the wheat field in 25 minutes. That's how often they fired before they got pushed back. But yeah, they were fighting with smoothbores because they wanted based close combat. Smoothbores aren't rifled. The bullet just comes out, so they're not very accurate. So you got to get close. That's what these guys are fighting for. Yeah. So we're not talking about Minty and Wilder with these space age weapons, Mary.
Space age weapons. The
Irish wanted to get in their faces.
Here's a good one. Gentili says, "What if Tommy Gavin were at Gettysburg?"
Oh, there'd be a lot of fights.
Or wasn't he Ledley?
Yeah, that's pretty true though. But
Ledley.
I mean, it's always fun, fascinating to study these whole things too. You could load up the balls and those smooth boards. It acts like a mini
Yeah.
canister fire, like a shotgun environment. But it's pretty neat though. Um, but the guys fought hard. New
Mhm.
York, Boston, Philly. That's for the most part where they all came from.
Yeah. Goes to Sickles Legs said we are forgetting the most honored Irish soldier Buster Kilrain. I think Gentile would agree
Yeah,
from
I
there.
didn't.
I think I'm
I
going to
didn't.
put a small marker and set up a little
Yeah, I
round
didn't want to.
top.
I don't want to bring up Buster. I don't want to be an emotional situation for Gentilly, but I was hoping we could leave that out. But I'm pretty sure he's going to end up in the episode. You know,
Buster is Claiborne. Buster is Chamberlain's horse.
yeah.
Pretty sure. Civil War Trail said MJ, talking to MJ here. Claiborne was tops. Magruder was pretty amazing too until he got canceled and was sent way to the west.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about Claiborne. Magruder's a fascinating guy too.
Civil
He's
War
the
Trail's
one.
Buster lives.
If you really want a guy who kind of pantsed McClellan, it's Magruder,
Yeah,
Yorktown, right? Sending him around and around and around. But he
yeah.
was a good one too. People don't study a lot of Magruder, but he's another one of those I don't want to say B level guys, but that second level type of people who don't really study. But
Yeah.
Claiborne certainly was. And Claiborne's an A-list guy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing the episode about him because we talked about him in a lot of episodes, but never done an episode covering his whole life, which is fascinating. He's in like the British Army. He's, comes over to America, starts off in Ohio, gets a job offer in Helena, Arkansas, goes there, joins the Freemasons while he's there, becomes pretty like, he speaks at one of their, what is it, like kind of their big meeting they have every year.
Don't know
And
what you're talking about.
trying to do the history here. Albert Pike is one of the ones who supposedly was at his raising or something. But anyway, he gets into that. And then he enlists and he gets involved in politics, nearly dies in that fight.
No, he
Someone
does. He
shoots him in
does.
the stomach.
She got stabbed. Thomas Hinman, he gets in a fight. Thomas Hinman is like the Tommy Gavin of his friends.
So
I'm like,
him and like
he's
Tommy Gavin.
Thomas Hinman was a guy you'd go out with if you want to get in a bar fight.
Okay, so
Who you calling yellow? That's who he was.
I know
Oh,
not
that,
everybody
that
on here has watched Rescue Me, but so Thomas Hinman is like Tommy Gavin. So does that make Claiborne Lou?
I probably would. So, it's funny. Speaking before I forget, Buster, how would it like to be a fly on the wall when Drew from Civil War Trails walks to the National Park Service and says he wants a Civil War Trails Buster sign, a little round top?
That would be a great
Can you
April Fool's joke.
on April? Oh my God, would that be funny? You just call it the bloody armpit. That's what you call it.
Have the sign already made up, like just have like a paper copy of what they want to do.
Would not be a sign; it'd be a killer sign. So stupid, but it's pretty funny though. But yeah, but to be honest though, the Buster, we've said this before, Buster Kilrain did exist. There was thousands of Buster Kilrains in the Civil War. And John has this theory that Buster's actually Chamberlain's horse that no one could see except him.
His inner monologue.
Yeah, his right. So, but who knows?
Which, if you watch the movie, it makes sense because nobody, the only person that talks to Buster is Chamberlain. And there's that one scene in Little Round Top where Buster's there, but nobody is acknowledging his existence. We told our friend Spencer you told Spencer that theory, and Spencer's like, that makes sense.
Well, I've told that story to a couple of people, and I've told it to him and I told it to Hessler. And they both have the same response. They go, no way. And they go, hey, wait a minute. They first then they think, oh, as I think about it,
it's
who knows? As good if there is anybody else's. But yes, Buster sign a little round top. Imagine that.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
You could put on the Oates rock. Piss off the ghosts of William C. Oates. That's what you put on that rock?
AQ was Buster Chamberlain's imaginary friend. Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Well, that's
the inner monologue or the conversations he's having with his horse, because Chamberlain is always like, you need to get on the horse.
Yeah.
And then the horse dies.
Well, there's a couple of scenes where Chamberlain does ride the horse, though. There are a few signs, but it's funny why don't you ride the damn horse?
Yeah,
that the good Lord gave you, right?
Yeah,
and it's kind of like, hey, but who knows?
This was his Fight Club.
Yeah, exactly. But it's fun. You've watched that movie way, way, way more too many times if you start thinking on that level.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things, you sit down, you drink a bunch of beer or something like that, or find some other mind altering substance, and you sit around and you start thinking about it. maybe he's the horse.
Horse, but the horse can talk.
And then everyone's like, oh, you know?
But the horse, but the horse
but the
can
horse
talk.
can talk,
Talk.
right? But who knows? But that's the thing is it's we've all been to. I've been around top in different places, and I've been up there, and people are like, oh, I'll have my little kepi hat or my uniform jacket thing. People will sit there and say, um, where how come Buster Crane's name is not on the monument of the 20th?
It's
And
like,
so people,
no.
because if you watch the movie and that's all you know, it may
Yep.
of course
It makes sense.
I always tell people all the time, well, who was Buster Crane? I go, Buster Crane, he was Spartacus. Everyone was Buster Crane,
Yeah, he
right?
represents kind of the Irish
He
side of the
was.
Civil War. And I do think he's a great character that, because often in historical fiction, you do have one character that is like made up and
The
the rest
one
are real.
the one thing about the movie Gettysburg and this is when Michael Shaw wrote his book, and then when Ron Maxwell made the movie, they stayed away for the most part from slavery and racism,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
only hint of racism was Buster Kilrain. And
Yeah.
that scene was not even in the book, it was only in the
No.
movie when he talks about the black race, he called it.
Yeah.
And he did that. And if you know your history, you know how racist the Irish were towards the blacks. We talked about this a little while ago because of how they felt about stealing their jobs. It was an economic thing. And when you study the New York draft riots,
Yeah.
when you see how angry and how they were, it's a scary concept. But it's the only, and they've just barely breached it.
Yeah.
But they did, and it was it was appropriate that he
Yeah.
did that. But it was always funny how Sharon never put that in the book. It was only in the movie, and that was clearly
Yeah.
by design.
Yep. A.Q. Chamberlain. I've been through the battlefield of Gettysburg on a horse with no name.
That song never made sense. If you're riding through the desert, you have all that time to name the friggin' horse. Name the horse.
I thought you thought the lyrics were horse with no legs.
Oh, that's what I thought originally. Horse with no
I
legs.
know
That's
other
probably
people
why.
have thought that.
That's probably why it took so long to get across the desert.
Horse with no legs.
Yeah, I don't know.
And the other thing I do want to talk about briefly is like just looking at your t-shirt you're wearing is the people over at Getty's Gear.
Yeah.
If anybody thank you to them for promoting like this, like they've really helped promote us and other groups and businesses in Gettysburg. I know MJ talked to them the other day too, but yes, if you find yourself in Gettysburg, head on over to Getty's Gear. Like they've got coffee, awesome cigars, they've got dog treats, cat treats. So I think they're pet friendly, which is awesome. And they also have the space where Ken Rich gives his Sunday morning talks as well.
Yeah, Ken Rich, the guy Matt calls the mysterious red shirt man.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. He does his speech. But they're what's cool about a lot of these civil towns, but especially Gettysburg, is, and we talked a lot to Carrie from Getty's Gear, is they'll have a local companies all do support each other.
Yes.
And yes, I know you have your Walmart, you have your out on York Road, but for the most part, you have all those shops downtown. They're all kind of kindred spirits, and so if he can't get you something, he'll tell you where to go in town to get it.
Yeah.
He's really cool.
He reminds me, honestly, a lot of my uncle who owns a small business in Goderich, which my grandfather opened in 1956. It's still open. Good for them for being able to compete with Walmart. But the thing is about, the one thing when I worked there is if we didn't have it, we would see if we could get it. But if we knew of a business in town that already had it, we'd be like, no, go over here and get it. You support each other. And you're actually stronger that way. It's kind of like in the history field. We need to support each other and not compete with each other.
Yeah, this was another bad week for social media for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just like whatever. But Autumn mentions she's drinking their coffee. MJ says their General Coffee is amazing. We've had that one. We just bought the Irish cream one that they have right now for March. It's so good. And you can order online as well. And I think they do ship to you. The other thing too, they sell Battle of Gettysburg podcast stickers, and they have our stickers there now too, which is really awesome.
Yeah. So if you want stickers from us or Eric and Jody and Jimmy, you can go there and you can go pick one up there. But it's cool though. But that you can buy the thing about Getty's Gear in all seriousness is their cigars are the best you'll ever have. If you're a cigar person like me, I mean, I've had friends who've gone to Cuba to buy cigars and all these places, and I have a friend from Michigan who's a cigar connoisseur. He's kind of like the ultimate cigar snob, and I got him a box of those one time. I went out to Ann Arbor with him for a few days and did some shenanigans out there at the University of Michigan, and I gave him a box of cigars, and he says they're the best he's ever had. And this is a guy that's praise from Caesar for cigar people, and I told him that, and it's so good. The Sickle cigar is great. The Hancock one is great. The Lincoln one is good.
Yeah, they don't have the Sickles one anymore, but they're thinking of bringing it back.
Yeah,
This,
and so if you're into that, I know cigars are dangerous. You
but
shouldn't
you
do it.
also, but you got the one that General Grant the brand he smoked, right?
Yeah. So he has a brand that allegedly that General Grant smoked regularly. It's kind of a tall, thin one. Maybe we'll smoke that tomorrow, Mary. It's gonna be warm tomorrow. Sit outside the deck with fire cigars, you know. But regardless, and unfortunately, because Union Cigar is gone, they're in Carlisle now. There's not a lot of places to go to get a good cigar. There's a cigar place right across from Jenny Way, which is pretty good too.
Yeah.
But and it's more of a traditional cigar place with a cigar shop Indian out front and all that.
Yeah.
But Getty's Gear is better. I've had them, although you can get the Claiborne cigars that's dipped in whiskey.
Yeah.
Over at that place, but they don't always have them. But if you're gonna, truth be told, if you're gonna get cigars, get coffee, if you like t-shirts, hats, they even have pictures of like Hancock of all things.
Yeah, we got a pillow from there.
They got the Hancock. They have the Hancock late war years, the panorama one. They got that picture. But you
said an episode about him?
It was
something about his diet or something. Oh, BMI. We're not talking about Hancock the later years.
Yeah, but you can buy all those things. It's good. It's a good local company, and so we'll definitely like to partner with them too.
Yeah, Civil War Trail said, good to know about the cigars. We were bummed to see Union Cigar closing up too. We were bummed as well because to get cigars, we went to like all those places, tried to frequent them equally. But yeah, when you're in Gettysburg, stop by Getty's Gear because their cigars are great. They're so good, very good.
Yeah, no, it's so. Yeah, but it's too bad that it's Union Cigar the last night they were open. It was around New Year's, and so we went there and they were shutting down, and it was great. You can go there and sit in the back, and you could fire a cigar up, and you could bring your own drinks in. There's always cool people hanging in there. One day, a couple of years ago, I went in there. There was a bunch of Rangers, and we were all watching the Gettysburg movie together, and they're all making fun of the different things, laughing about it. But no, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. The show must go on. But there's nothing better, I'll tell you right now, than getting a cigar and sitting with a little whiskey in the backyard with the fire pit going. And oh my God, that's heaven right there.
I got the Hancock cigar, and like I said, you got the one that General Grant's the brand, and the guy mentioned even Lincoln smoked that brand too.
Yeah,
which
Lincoln didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He didn't swear.
Actually, he did. If I had to deal with some of the shit Lincoln dealt with, like Mary Lincoln, I would be swearing too.
See, I think it's easy being a guy. It's not. Anybody who knows that you're named Mary knows the struggle.
Not fair. AQ is their Barlow cigar flavored with popcorn.
No, but if you buy 10 Barlow cigars, you get a free merit badge. So that's pretty cool. You become a Weebelo. A long story with that one. But there's a lot of cool places to go with that. But as far as going back to that seminar we went to a couple of days ago, there's what's cool about you have the winter lectures, you have Ken Rich's thing that we mentioned a little bit ago. There's all these cool little things you can go to just nerd out in that town. Yeah. And it's not just specific to Gettysburg. You can do these a lot of things. Antietam's got the volunteer program. You can go there and see some of their stuff. There's all kinds of stuff. Kernstown is finally open on weekends. Yeah. You see that?
It is. Cisco mentions, do they sell cigars wrapped in an order from Lee? That would be great for that person. That's amazing.
Yeah, that would be a good idea to do that. We got to talk to Borders and have them sell those cigars at Monocacy. I don't know if you probably need a license to sell tobacco, probably, but if you don't, if you're a cigar person in Frederick, Maryland, and you don't sell Lost 191 order cigars, then you're missing the boat. Can you imagine how cool that would be?
Go ahead. See you, AQ. Have a good weekend.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she wants us to get up to her neck of the woods to visit her. We'll have to do that some weekend.
Yeah, we gotta get up to Cape Ann, and we were talking about Cape Ann this morning, actually.
Yeah, we were. How it's part of the Boston area.
Yeah, someone said that Salem was not part of Boston, which is weird. You know what they don't have in Salem? Georgians.
Yep. Put out the bat signal for Kevin.
Yeah, God.
But yeah, it was the one thing I liked about Jim's talk is Jim Hessler talked about how it's kind of overblown about Sickles being the one to kind of talk against Meade and other evidence that,
Yeah.
that supports that. I really like that. But what it triggered in my mind was the letter that Howard wrote to Abraham Lincoln a few days after Gettysburg, basically
Right.
saying, and it's an off the record letter, it's labeled as unofficial. And Howard basically says to him, like the way Howard speaks to Lincoln, I'm like, holy shit, is he forgetting he's talking to the president? Because he's very adamant. He's like, you need to stop the media right now. We are all in support of Meade. And the one thing he says, he's like, the Army of the Potomac is more together than it ever has been under any other commander. And Lincoln
Yep.
writes him back and basically is like, okay, I'm gonna basically like, okay, I get it.
That's the thing I don't quite get though, is his speech was really, really good. But I mean, are there a lot of people who blame Sickles for
There,
I mean,
I think,
I guess
I think there are.
I think when I think of the anti-Meade sentiment from Gettysburg, obviously what comes up is the lack of pursuing and letting him escape over the Potomac back at Williamsport. But I don't I don't think his reputation was sullied. I'm sure Sickles did what he did to clear his own name. He got the Medal of Honor from basically just, I don't want to say disobeying orders, but certainly
Yeah.
working in the gray area. But I mean, I was listening to him thinking, okay, it makes sense, but I don't see that huge sentiment of people bashing Meade specifically because of Sickles.
I've seen it before. Like
I mean,
I've seen it
but I
before.
think it's
I've
more of a
read about
minority. I
it.
think it's more of a minority than a majority. I mean, when you think about the hatchet job people, like the Stephen Sears people, McClellan, right? No, seriously. I mean, he
I'm
should
with
write his
Howard
art.
too.
He should write his books of, Crystal Lake, the camp, as far as putting knives in people. But when you look at that, I think more of that. When you think of like the Gettysburg book by Gelzo,
Hmm.
which takes a warm beer piss all over Meade,
Oh yeah, it
but
does.
he does that for different reasons. But I never really, and what's great about the seminar is because it put an idea in my head that was a sentiment. But I never thought that all the anti-Meade Gettysburg stuff was because of Sickles.
I actually I thought it was just because honestly in some Lincoln biographies that's the slant it takes, that he was there like basically
Yeah.
whispering in Mary Lincoln's ear about it. But I don't know, his talk was very thought provoking. And it
Yeah,
just
no, it definitely
like I said, it
was.
reminded me of that letter that Howard had written. That was Howard
Yeah.
was like basically saying Howard was blaming the media and saying you need to stop. And he was the only one of the AOP, I think, to write a letter like that in defense of Meade. And it was interesting on social media or Facebook this week, someone else mentioned that letter. And we were talking about how just not many people talk about this letter that Howard wrote.
Yeah.
And it's really part of another part of the Gettysburg story that doesn't get talked about a lot, that there's this the youngest corps commander is coming to the defense, and Howard supported whoever was in charge. I mean, the worst thing Howard writes in his memoirs is that Hood is stupid. That's like the most disparaging thing he says.
Well, no, people take what he wrote, somehow writing on his battle report that Doubleday fell back was somehow lying and trashing Doubleday.
Yeah, he didn't
I mean
lie.
that's the level of it, and but again, history is great because it's all interpretation. There's no but when you find yourself, and this is someone told me a long time ago, when you find yourself doing history and talking in absolutes and
Yeah,
superlatives, you're going on down a wrong road,
yeah.
because there is no best, there is no worst, there is no this guy 100% did this, 0% did this, because it's interpretive. And when you start saying that besides an obvious fact,
Yeah.
right? That you're relying on letters and memoirs and stories, and a lot of them are wives' tales.
Hmm.
And if you take them as pure fact, you hold on to those facts like grim death to a point when you're insulting people and calling people clowns on social media
Hmm.
because you have a different opinion from you.
Yeah.
Well, then you have to do a little self-interpretation here, right?
Yeah.
But that's why we do history. That's what's cool about it
Yeah. It's
is
all interpretation. It's
and
all
and if you
in.
and if you look specifically at the lack of pursuit, for example, of Meade, he did pursue him. I mean,
Mhm.
you could there's a whole book about Kent Masterson Brown showing what
Amazing
Meade
book.
did.
Yep.
Now you can, if you want to, you can take shots at Meade and look. Meade is put in charge 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg, the biggest battle ever fought in the Western Hemisphere. And he doesn't even know where his divisions are. He doesn't know where his corps are. He's got to pull it all together. Buford does his thing. Reynolds gets killed. Now the Pipe Creek plan's out the window. Now you got to decide on the fly where to go. Oh crap! Now I guess we're all moving forward. Here we go. You're moving blind into this ground. But thank God for Howard, though, right? Because he took that heights, and he did. But it's easy to sit back and look back and read your Coddingtons and read your Fonzes of the world and sit there and said, as you're sitting there in John Gentile's, his velvet jacket and his author home look, right, with all the books behind him, to talk about to sit there and say, well, what he should have done was, if he was studying, what he would have done. I mean, that's all great. And like we said before, get yourself a ham sandwich, go to a bee's nest, hit it with a bat, and sit under the bee's nest and eat your sandwich. And that's what Meade had to experience in real time. Now, we could look at, speaking of Gettysburg now, some of the decisions he made, especially with the cavalry.
Yeah.
And how that worked, where he maybe gave Pleasanton maybe too much respect, who was maybe the most incompetent underling he had, because somehow between when they all went to Two Taverns, this is Kilpatrick's people now.
Yeah.
They wake up on the morning of July 3rd with a plan to attack at 10 o'clock in the morning. Custer's gone. Mm-hmm. He went to the other end with Run DMG, Dave McMurtry Gregg. Yep. He leaves back Elon Farnsworth. And, Elon Farnsworth, 3 days before the battle, was a captain, as was Custer, as was Wesley Merritt. So somehow Buford falls back to Westminster. Yeah. He leaves Merritt up, who doesn't report to Kilpatrick, to attack the Confederate right. And of course they don't, because it's all screwed up. Yep. How Meade didn't have a tighter control of the cavalry on that end, you can kind of hit Meade on. But I think for the most part, he did the best job he possibly could, considering the circumstances.
I agree, he did. And that's basically what Howard says. He's like, this guy is holding us together when we were not too good after Chancellorsville. Morale is getting better, and he's, basically slow the media down and make a statement, and don't blame him for this. And it's almost like Howard had an inkling that Lincoln was going to send him a letter basically being like, dude, why didn't you pursue more, kind of thing.
But just to tie this whole loop with the cavalry, it's by happenstance and by good luck Custer did go, because Custer was reordered to come back to Kilpatrick. And he said, he went to McMurtry Gregg and said, I don't think I should go because Jeb Stuart's here. Wade Hampton's here.
Yeah.
Maybe I should stick around and help everybody out. And McMurtry basically says, he says to him, if you order me, I'll stay. He goes, okay, I'll order you to stay. Screw Pleasanton. I'll take the hit for it. And he does what he does because Custer, obviously, in his Michiganders.
I think we got some Michiganders on here.
So let me clarify. But fortunately, they're able to hold off that East Cavalry field, and it leaves Kilpatrick with Elon Farnsworth. And Farnsworth, you could just picture him on Bushman Hill. I don't want to do it with Kilpatrick, because there's no way we can get horses over this ground. It's rocks. And Kilpatrick says, well, General Farnsworth, if you don't do it, I will lead your men. And Farnsworth's like, fuck off, man. Fine, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And he ends up bursting through the 4th Alabama and coming back and running into Oates' 15th Alabama and gets his ass killed on really a fruitless mission.
Yeah.
Right? Because Wesley Merritt, he's supposed to be hitting the Georgians, and they run into those first Texan skirmishers, and the whole thing was out the window. Yeah. But just imagine all these horses from Farnsworth breaking through with the Slider farmers now in that field, running around in circles because they have no orders. Burst through. That's the only order they had. Yeah. They thought the Union, the Confederate infantry, was retreating, and that's the only time cavalry is supposed to attack infantry, is when they're moving. They weren't moving, so when they realized they were moving, they just did figure eights and ran around the line. So you could look at the communication between Meade and Pleasanton, certainly Pleasanton and Kilpatrick with Custer and Farnsworth. But again, in real time, this is all fluid shit, right?
Oh yeah, you're thinking on the fly, all this other stuff. There's this fog of battle. Sickles Lake, it's Michiganders.
I thought it was Michiganders.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell it is sometimes, but but
Yeah.
I think that sounds about right.
You were right. But yeah, it was got off a tangent about Jim's talk. But yeah, all the talks were really good. I really liked Pete Mealy's about kind of just the health crisis, the public health crisis after the battle was really, really interesting. Um, and
Yeah.
then Cody Aish gave a talk too. His was really, really good. They all were like it was all this, and great they offered the digital option as well. But yeah, there was a lot going on in Gettysburg that weekend. There always is like, you have your winter lecture series over at the visitor center as well, which I
Yeah.
think they had Harriet Tubman last weekend, and then there was another
Harry
one.
Tubman was there? No,
Well, it is Women's History Month
I
too.
know, and I know they had a thing over it. But
Yeah,
no, but well, I forgot what I was gonna say, but yeah, but that's a cool thing about the history though,
yeah,
all that stuff.
yeah,
I was
for
gonna
sure.
oh no, I was gonna say you mentioned the aftermath with Pete Mealy. There's a really good book called When the Smoke Cleared at Gettysburg,
Yeah, he
right?
mentions that. I think he
Um,
mentioned that book is
and it really gives you that aspect of like George Rose, his
yeah,
daughter, living at the Rose farm. They come back to their house, and you've been to the Rose farm. The Georgian bodies are buried there,
yeah,
and the daughter talks about she'd wake up in the morning, walk outside, probably get her Gettysburg coffee, probably, right? And she sees after the rains, the bodies coming back to the ground. And allegedly she like went insane, went to a nut house from seeing all
oh,
this stuff. But this, you could smell Gettysburg for miles,
yeah.
you know? And I'm not talking about the mine. I'm talking about the town.
Mine is awesome. Actually, great conversation at the mine last week with MJ and her living history group. Um, I actually Buford, the guy that plays Buford, was there, and I asked him, I was like, when did you write the letter that causes Howard to be thrown under the bus? And he said, the conversation I had with him was this is just his opinion, the guy that plays him. It was written before Buford knew Howard was on the field.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
And that's an interesting take because that is the letter that Stephen Sears uses to throw
Yeah.
Howard under the bus.
Oh, there's no question. And like anything else, it's timing.
Yeah.
It's when if that letter is written at noontime, it's a lot different than it's written at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Because if it's written early, yes, of course, Reynolds is down, Doubleday's in charge, but now Howard's in charge. You don't know who's doing what.
Yep.
So of course you're going to write back and say that there seems to be no one in charge because you just don't know. But Howard
Yeah.
ordered Buford on the Emmitsburg Road,
Yeah.
right? And so when you're talking about like those Confederates, that second wave, right? Guys like Lane coming through. No one ever studies Lane when you're starting on that first day, but he's gonna run into those cavalry there. So someone ordered Buford there.
Yeah.
It was Howard.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a very, I don't know, it's a very interesting kind of like it's an interesting debate. It's amazing to see how like with the Civil War, and we've talked about this a lot, that you have certain authors that just like, oh hey, Ben's tuning in from Dallas.
oh yeah,
Cool. Hey Ben.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you have
We saw
like
we saw Dallas last night, Mary.
you did.
Always fun to see our old friend Kyrie come back to town. He was treated as warmly as he usually is
He
when he comes
was.
back.
Yep.
Freaking
God, people
yeah.
hate him.
Oh, screw him. Anyway, it's good to see the Celtics put the beat down on Dallas last night. It was
Yeah.
like watching a Cowboys playoff game, Mary.
Yeah. But as a like so there's certain voices, authors in the Civil War that you hear a lot more of than others, and they've kind of become this like, I don't want to say gospel, but it gets to a point where they are secondary sources and they're treated like what they're writing is correct, but that it's how those authors interpret the primary sources. But like, I always tell people, like when they're doing research, like if I'm helping undergraduate students or graduate students at the library I work at, I always tell them like sometimes you have to look at what is there in a secondary source, but also what is not there. What voice did they leave out that they could have had, or maybe at the time didn't have access to that we now know about? Or what
Well,
are they?
you can if you're writing a book, I mean, you can use primary sources. You can
Yep.
pick and choose, and you can spin the narrative any way you want. And
Yep.
that's not an indictment of historians or authors.
No,
That's
it's
just
not. No.
that's what you do. I mean, some people like vanilla ice cream, some people like chocolate ice cream, right? And you're gonna cater to what you like the best. But we've said this before, you can read an author or you can read an article, and you can tell if you study this close enough, you can tell exactly what the use of a source is.
You can tell who they're going, you can tell what they've used, but the other thing is too, is that there sometimes are primary sources that are available that go against what their opinion is, but they don't utilize that primary source because it's like, well, that
The
goes against what
problem
I
with
say.
the problem, and if you when you look at a primary specific source, you have to look at the intention of the writer.
Yeah.
We've said this before. Abner Small, right from the 16th Maine, he was part of the third Maine with Howard, and for whatever reason, he hated Howard. I mean, he hated Howard. I mean, he just did, right? And so when he writes his Road to Richmond diary,
Mhm.
he is very negative about Howard at
Yep.
Gettysburg. And that's a lot where the narrative comes from about the big fight between, well, Winnie Boy and Howard on Cemetery Hill when he arrives and he says, I'm in charge, Otis. And Otis says, no, you're not. I outrank you. But he goes, aha, but I have orders. Would you like to see them?
Yep.
And Howard says, no, I trust you. You're an officer. And they decide you're going to take this side of the road,
Yeah.
all that stuff. But Howard, I mean, Small talks about this big pissing match,
Yep.
and that gets picked up by historians like Sears, right, who use that as their source. But it doesn't take into account the fact of how much Small did not like Howard and why he would have said that about that. And so it becomes fact, becomes historical memory. We've said a lot about McClellan, speaking of Sears,
Yep.
where he takes that Nathan Kimball source, speaking of Kernstown, right? And which was debunked almost in real time. And
Yeah.
he uses that to create this 16-hour window.
Some people say it's 18.
Right. And so and that's because you're picking and choosing.
Yeah.
And so if you read or speak to a guy like Tom Clemens, for example, who is very much going a long way in debunking a lot of that narrative, trying to pick the weeds and see the intention of what this was, it paints a different level of history. Doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they're interpreting it a certain way. But that's why you got to read more than just the one source. We say
that's why you have to look at, and like I said, what are they ignoring? Because there are sources they had access to that they were like, nope, this goes against the narrative that I'm trying to spin. There's always bias. You're not free of it.
Yeah.
But like, and you look at the primary sources that we have for the fight on East Cemetery Hill, the fight, that Howard and Hancock both said, we didn't do that. Like, you have the two guys that were there that are saying like, it didn't happen that way. Like, it didn't.
No, what they want to create that, anybody who follows wrestling, there was that great moment in WWF history when Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels were buddies, right?
Yeah.
And they win this big thing and they're all high-fiving each other. And all of a sudden, out of left field, Michaels drops Hogan.
Yeah.
Boom. He's hard. It turns into this big fight. That's what they want to spin this Howard Hancock thing. Yeah. They got there as friends and they ended up in this big fight, which didn't really happen. At least not the way you say it was. I think Howard on his day, I mean, the thing about Howard is, again, using the Monday morning quarterback thing. Me personally, I think he was relieved he was out of power.
I think so too.
I think he's like, you know what, you're in charge. Thank God, fine.
Because he's been at it since the morning.
He saw a lot of shit. I think he knew he'd done a good job to that point.
Yep.
I mean, yes, things didn't go well. Again, you've got 27,000 Confederates and 17,000 Union. I mean, it's a numbers game. You're not going to be able to. You're getting pushed back. But they were smart enough to hold that area. He defends the hill, Cemetery Hill, and now Winnie Boy rolls in, right, with his McDonald's bag and in his smile.
You're gonna get an RKO.
I can see him rolling in with he's got Grimace on his right, Mayor McCheese on his left, coming in, and he gets to town and he's like, I'm in charge, everything's cool. He hasn't seen the battle, and Howard's like, you know what? Okay, fine. I think he was relieved to see Hancock,
he was too.
because I think he woke up that morning thinking he's going to move his 11th Corps into town. He's going to get into town. He's going to chill. He's going to see what happens. Next thing you know, he's in charge of the whole damn shooting match.
Yep.
Just a couple months after Chancellorsville, and so he knows he can't retreat. So he's going to stop and defend. I think he was happy. I think he was.
Oh, I think he was too, because by that point he's exhausted, and people kind of rag on Howard for being like freaking out and having like a temper tantrum. I'm sorry, but if I was in his position, I would have been the same way. I would have been like, I'm done. I need to kind of like just, whatever for a few minutes.
Yeah.
and then I'll
Yeah.
be okay. Hancock is coming onto the battlefield with fresh eyes, not having had all those adrenaline rushes and all the physical stuff that go, like, just the whole, like, you are exhausted after adrenaline rush, which Howard probably had. Hancock's coming on with fresh eyes, and he's seeing it, and that's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah.
I commend them both for what they did on East Cemetery Hill. They're equally, they equally need credit for that,
Yeah.
not one
No,
over the other,
no, it's that's the reality about it. But it's fun. It's fun to study the stuff, and it's fun to look at that stuff. But it creates a good versus bad characters. It does the black hats versus the white hats and
Yeah,
all that stuff. And we have people who enjoy certain people and don't like. I'm going to talk about historical people now
yeah,
who like certain people and dislike other people, and and it becomes almost like rooting for sports teams, and we see
yeah,
that. But and it's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you have to be able to be open.
yeah.
And we've talked about this offline and stuff like that. That we have a situation where we both done 180s on different
Yeah.
things because that's the whole thing of it. No one knows everything.
I've changed my opinion. I mean, I still love to study Sherman, but I've changed my opinion of him quite a bit. I used to be very very much in the Howard sucks camp, but the more I read, the more I realized that I'm like, wow, this guy's worth studying. And I've done, obviously, like, he's my favorite one to study. I think he's not talked about enough. I think he doesn't get enough credit, and I think it's very easy to say that, like, oh, he sucked. I've changed about my opinion of Sickles. I'm still Team Meade, but I understand why Dan Sickles did what he did on July the 2nd. You can change, and there's other things I've changed my opinion about too. In the
Yeah.
Western theater, just stuff like that, or people I've learned about that I'm like, why don't we know more about somebody like Hiram Granberry? Why don't we know more about even someone like Zollicoffer studying some of these early battles in the Western theater? I've changed my opinion about Albert Sidney Johnston. I used to think, like, yeah, he would have been the best thing ever if he had lived, and now I'm kind of like, would he have
Well,
been though?
you never know.
Yeah,
He's like the thing we like to say. He's got that Kurt Cobain syndrome. You always wonder what he could have been, how things
yeah,
could have changed. Would he have been the greatest thing in the world, or would he would have turned into Fat Elvis in the bathroom? You
yeah.
never know. But that's the
Frank
cool thing
said,
about it, though.
Frank said, I heard Hancock is coming to the battlefield with French fries, but Mayor said fresh eyes.
See, this is what happens. This is what happens
It's
now.
actually really funny.
Yeah. Okay. That again, that's we say it before. Now he belongs to the ages versus angels.
Yep.
He arrived with French fries. It all
Yep.
makes sense now.
Fresh.
He went to
Ghost of Sickles. Thank you for your acknowledgement of the greatness of Sickles. We do
we're
we
de-
we are Team Sickles, but like
no,
I said,
we're
I'm still Team Meade. I love George Meade. He is, like, if I'm gonna get, MJ brought up tattoos, and I was telling her this last weekend. I do want to get Meade's signature on my arm.
no, and what you just said. I mean, you don't. It's not necessarily one or the other. Like I like Meade. I like Sickles. The one thing that bothers me is when people say Sickles was stupid.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a political joke. He was one of the smart. If you've read Sickles, if you've read what he wrote, the dude's brilliant. He just
Yeah.
is. And you can say anything you want about all these people. And we had Hessler on one time. We talk about that, and we talked a lot about the orders that he
Mhm.
had. Because he did. If anyone has been to where the third corps was initially placed, it's not a great area. We mentioned like
No.
Farnsworth a little while ago. It's all rocks and boulders and streams. So Meade did give him the ability to adjust his line. Now he probably should have been more clear, but old Uncle Dan's defense, 5 times he sent couriers back for clarification. Can I
Yep.
do this? But he did do it, and he did it anyway.
Yeah.
But again, if you follow the Charles Payne map like a lot of
Mhm.
people do, um, then he was where he was supposed to be anyway.
Yep.
And we talked a lot about that today, with a lot of some people believe it. There are people like the Chuck Teagues of the world who are big proponents of the pain map, and he's retired
Chuck
now from the
Teague is
battle.
awesome.
Now Chuck's a great guy. And he knows his stuff, but he's a big proponent of that. Now he doesn't
Yeah.
like Sickles because Chuck is a former preacher.
Yeah.
Sickles off the court is different than Sickles on the court. You're always looking for love in all the wrong places, Mary, right? And so, but he was somebody who did what he did.
Yeah.
He was friends with Longstreet after the war, so of course Longstreet's saying things like, he basically helped win the battle. He moved out. He sank my battleship. All the stuff he said afterwards. But there's somewhere truth in the middle. But he does lose his leg. Over at the Schaefer farm up by the outlets over there down 15. They take him to Washington. He does get back there before and give his side of the story. And that's all true. But again, Meade and Sickles didn't get along anyway.
No.
He didn't. Meade wasn't a big fan of the Butterfield, Hooker, Sickles triumvirate of doom.
It was
right?
like a clique in high school. That's exactly what it was like. If you want to look at it like something, it was like a clique in high school. And Meade was also one that did not advocate for himself. Meade and Reynolds were very, very close. And it's really funny. Howard, when Carney was alive, was in that circle with Sickles and Carney and Butterfield. He got invited to the parties they had, and Howard obviously didn't drink, but for some reason he was in that circle. He was like the nerd that got invited to all the parties. Meade didn't get invited to those. So there was something about that too, that there was probably stuff being talked about that Meade didn't know about.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting, kind of this like what is going on off the battlefield is affecting what is happening on the battlefield in some cases.
Well, sure it does.
In many cases, this Mean Girls, there's so many Mean Girl moments in the Civil War. And that's what, like, someone, former colleague of mine asked me once, what do you find so fascinating about this? Besides the battles? And I said, I'm like, honestly, it's the people and the fact that the politics outside of it. And I said, I'm like, gave an example. You remember when you were in high school and there was that gossipy chick that was trying to make everybody fight? And she's like, yeah. And I said, that happens so much in the Civil War. And she was like, but they're all men. I'm like, yeah. And they're like teenage girls.
And this is, look, make no mistake, this is not just on the Union side here.
Yeah. It's happening on the Confederate side too.
No, I mean, if you look, just here we go about Gettysburg again, Mayor. Here we go, right? But you want to look at some of the stuff that went on the Confederate side. We were talking about Longstreet. Look at Ambrose Rice. This is a guy, a Georgian, who part of the echelon attack, according to Rice, he's gonna break through. And Lane's Floridians, they fight, they get pushed back by the 19th Maine, Julian Ware's artillery. They're gonna fight and push them back. So now it creates a gap. So Wright pushes forward. He's going to say he's going to get to the angle. He's going to get there. He's going to look around, and there's no one there supporting him. Yeah. Mahone and Posey on his left never started. Lane's fallen back. He's up by himself, and he's pissed off. He gets back to the Confederate line. He's already firing up letters about how Lane and the Floridians dicked him over. And it turns into a big pissing match. Who's not there, too, is Richard Anderson, the division commander. Allegedly, he's way in the back at some party, some picnic somewhere, getting banged up on something. And so it turns into a he said, she said in a fighting match, because it's like, I would have done this. This is my chance of glory, but I was let down. So they all go at each other. Mm-hmm. They all do.
Well, they do. In both theaters.
And don't forget, Lee was, he submitted his resignation after Gettysburg originally. He said, I'm done. And he says, this is all my fault. That's when the movie gets it right. He tried to take the blame for it.
Yeah.
But there's all these carping and bitching and control, all these little things. But you got a lot of things that went different. Pender's going to get hurt. He's going to go down, eventually die. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen, that are going to change that control and command on the Confederate side too. So it's tough to say, but at the end of the day, you're going to have people who are going to tell different sides of the stories, and depending on what side you read is the side you're likely going to stick with. And we see it all the time on social media.
Yeah, people just don't want to. But it's okay to change your opinion. It's okay to be like, not I was wrong, but I changed my opinion because of this. Cisco makes a great analogy. Howard was the designated driver. That
Yeah,
is
yeah,
so, he was also a designated driver in the March to the Sea. That's why Sherman puts him in charge at Columbia. You're the
yeah,
DD dude. Because you look at it that way. Okay, you need a designated driver. Are you
yeah.
going to pick Howard? Or are you going to pick Blackjack?
Well, Logan. I mean, the thing about it though is Logan.
Logan, I love Logan. He's awesome, but he is
Logan's got
not command
Logan's
an
got a
army.
Logan's got a circle in Washington D.C. You know,
Yeah,
Blackjack is. I mean, he's somebody who was a big name in the Civil War. He
yeah,
really, really was. But for whatever, especially with a cool nickname like that, you'd think that he'd
yeah.
be a little more mainstream.
Blackjack. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, when people say like, oh, Sherman passed him over and only because Howard went to West Point and blah, 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 there was many reasons why Logan was passed over. And one of them was because Howard would take orders and he wouldn't be like, I don't want to do that. He would just, but Howard was also, his reputation was a lot better in the Civil War than what it was today. Like he was
yeah.
very respected. You can see that in the letters that Sherman writes him and how people talk about him. Um, and I think Sherman made the right decision in putting him in charge because Sherman's also thinking forward. Like if I'm going to, march the sea, I need somebody who's going to just follow the orders and keep a cool head. And Howard's reputation in the Civil War, and so was Slocum's, was they both just were kind of like, whatever. Like just they kept it cool. They didn't freak out. Blackjack was a little. Blackjack was Blackjack. He's awesome. I love him, but he
Yeah,
was.
but just remember too, though, that March of the Sea, it wasn't. This wasn't Overland campaign fighting
No, I know
battle
it
after
wasn't.
battle
It
after
was
battle.
just and that's what but that's why like Sherman wanted somebody that wasn't going to be like, we need to fight now. And that's
I
kind
mean,
of how Blackjack was.
He had his men ready to fight. I mean,
Yeah.
Jones, but there was some fighting along the way. But I mean, I think if he saw this in his lifetime. I think he always felt the March of the Sea was overrated. And if he were to come back today, if we had Miss Cleo and could bring him back with her crystal ball,
Would
right?
she be able to tell us the sources?
He should be able to cite them. That's for damn sure, whether they were true or
Miss
not.
Miss Cleo.
You know, but what I'm saying is that he would be amazed at how much people make a big deal of March of the Sea
Yeah.
because in his mind, it was we had to get to Savannah because we
Mhm.
need to get to Savannah. We need to get to the ocean. We need to resupply with the Navy, and then move up the coast to meet up with Grant to help fight Lee. That's in a nutshell. That's all it was. It
Yeah.
was point A to point B, but that's where you get Margaret Mitchell involved, right? And
Yes.
that's where you get Gone with the Wind, and it turns into Cloverfield 4,
Yep.
right? With this monster that you don't see coming through. Everything's burning. That's what happens. And you fight
Yep.
that all the time, and it's fun to have fun with and read it. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll tell you right now, personally, Phil Sheridan in the Valley and Ulrich Dahlgren did a lot more
Yeah, they did.
negative shit than Sherman did.
Yep.
If you're looking at the real thing, now Sherman no angel. I mean, he burned stuff. He did what he had to do. But Sheridan skates because he was a true menace in the Shenandoah. He really, really
He
was.
he definitely was. And the thing with Sherman is you read in his memoirs, he's kind of like he says same thing about the March to Sea. This wasn't that big of a deal. It's moving a base of operations. Where I really got scared was when we went to the Carolinas and he was like, I didn't know if I could control my men like I had in Georgia. Georgia, they didn't really have, they were like, oh, whatever, we're having a good time. Well, the
Do you realize
bummers, all that.
how hard it must have been for Sherman to have his men not to destroy Charleston anyway?
Yep.
I mean, we talk about why he probably didn't and all everything that happened with all that. But at the end of the day, it would have not have been hard for that right wing to sneak in there and just cause mayhem. And if you read Mary Chestnut's diary, they were certainly expecting it. I mean,
Oh yeah.
that was the cradle. That's where the whole thing started. And so, as much as as much as the narrative is that he couldn't control his men, and they were humping parking meters and burning friggin' buildings and all the stuff they were talking about, right? But that all the stuff that they accuse him of, he doesn't get enough credit for keeping his men in control as they go through South Carolina, Columbia notwithstanding,
Yeah.
which is admittedly was kind of a thing, but
Yeah.
it's very similar for the same. Here's the thing, Mary. I'm going to tie history together here. Watch this now. The same people who will not give Sherman credit for controlling his men in March of the Sea are the same people who credit Lee for Order 62 for not destroying the Pennsylvania countryside.
Yeah.
He went into Pennsylvania and he kept his men in order. You're not going to do a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. And there was a couple of people who
Oh yeah, there always is. Yeah.
Imboden missed didn't get the memo and went all over Chambersburg for the most
Yeah.
part. But you had in Lee, they did some shit. They did. Longstreet was grabbing free blacks and bringing this up. All that
Yeah.
stuff is what he did. But he did not go and burn everything. And he gets credit for keeping his men under control, which he did for the most part, versus Sherman, who had a similar order, who they say
He
was
was
kind
like,
of a menace. Right?
yeah. Frank makes a good comment. I've said it before, but if Margaret Mitchell was from South Carolina, today's historical memory would be more focused on Sherman's Carolina March, and I think that's true.
No, I mean it was, and
Yeah,
Margaret Mitchell, and it's a good book, and the movie, the first half of the movie is good anyway.
I hate the second half.
Yeah, but it's a fiction book. It's historical fiction. It's what it is, and yeah, but I think he's right. I think if you could have had Mary Chestnut, someone make a movie about that whole thing, and it would have been different. Now she does capture the feeling in the area of this monster approaching. And it does bring out that real sense of dread, and she does capture that. But they over embellish it, and that's anybody who's been to Atlanta. It was a Sherman shirt like this guy has caught shit. Oh yeah, but that's the reality of it. But it's cool though. At least people are paying attention.
Yeah, it's a great study. And I mean, honestly, like Western theater, I still think does not get the attention it deserves. In all this, like there was a question that Emerging Civil War, which great follow on social media, they do a question of the week, and the question recently was like, what is your favorite 1864 campaign, battle, whatever? And I said Atlanta. It's such a Atlanta is so fascinating just because of like, not just because
better than Overland.
I enjoy studying it more.
No,
that's just my opinion. Someone said Overland. I mean, Overland is fascinating too, but I love Atlanta just because that's where like like I said, I'm more of a Western theater person, but for me it's got the people that I really love to study. It's got Howard, there's Slocum, Sherman is there, McPherson, Thomas, and you see this kind of cat and mouse game that is happening, and the politics behind the scenes are fascinating too. You have Joseph E. Johnson getting ousted by Hood, all because Hood is doing this kind of campaign in the background as he's recovering from his wound at Chickamauga. People like on the Confederate side, you've also got, besides Joseph E. Johnson, you've got Hardee, you've got Patrick Cleburne, Granbury, all these just fascinating battles, like Pickett's Mill, amazing battlefield to visit. It's very small, great place to hike. Kennesaw Mountain, Peachtree Creek, Jonesboro.
Those are all cool. I just like Overland. I like Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, North Anna, because for me it was like a hockey fight where two guys, John Cordick and Chris Nyland, or Jay Miller, pick 80s fighters back when the NHL wasn't into that, just going boom, boom, just swinging like crazy as long as they could. They fell apart. That's what Overland was, where Atlanta was more cat and mouse.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you had your Dallas, and you had your Kennesaw, and you had all that stuff, but for the most part, the Overland campaign was mano a mano, draw a line in the sand, and you have both armies falling apart at the seams. You've got Grant pulling heavy artillery guys down to fight. Your Lee, you've got one line at Cold Harbor. If they break it, you're done. And it was just a bloodbath, just trying to knock each other's head off. It was more of versus, like I said, versus Atlanta, which is more of trying to outwit each other.
Yeah. And so that's what I like about Atlanta.
So if you're a strategist and you're a thinking man type person, yeah, Atlanta's cool.
Yeah,
you're flanking, you're going around, you're falling back, you're staying on the train lines, the whole deal. You're going off the train lines with New Hope Church and all that stuff. But Overland is just kind of like, this is me, this is you, let's just go. Boom, 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 boom. And that's what's great about studying battles like Spotsylvania and Cold Harbor especially, is you have these type of just bloodbaths, and not to minimize the whole Atlanta thing.
No, you're not at all.
It was kind of like the grand finale. It was Lee's last offensive in a lot of cases, and it was the end of the fireworks. All they're going bang, 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 bang. This was Lee's last chance, he goes to Petersburg, obviously, and he gets siege. He runs out to Farmville, and he ends up getting Appomattox, and that's the end of it. But the Overland Campaign was the grand finale
Mhm.
for that, and that's why. But there's nothing whatsoever about wrong about Atlanta. There was more strategy in Atlanta
Yeah.
versus Overland's rolling up your sleeves. Let's go.
That's what I mean, and I like both. And like Overland campaign is equal with Atlanta campaign for their importance. I just love Atlanta because like, the people that are involved and just kind of this like the more the psychological game that is starting to be played. And also too with 1864, Frank says it's such a fascinating year to study. Is just you also have this culminating in the Western theater with the demise of the Army of Tennessee at the hands of, I am going to say, yes, Hood definitely had a hand in their demise. You see the deaths of like all those generals at Franklin, which is just, what could they have done post Civil War? But after Atlanta, it's all becoming
Right? But
unnecessary.
but if you could open up overall campaigns, I
Mhm.
mean, you gotta look at Vicksburg campaign. You got to
Oh
look at
yeah,
Tullahoma campaign.
Oklahoma is brilliant.
Um, you can look at Gettysburg campaign on the Union side. Especially what's great about all of them is they're all unique and they're all different, right?
Mhm.
Tullahoma, you can Rosecrans against Bragg, and you're working through maybe the most brilliant campaign in the war when you look at how it ended, because he basically beat them without a fight.
Yeah,
Versus Vicksburg, which is months and months and months trying to
nine
get
months. Yeah.
through. Versus Gettysburg, what's great about the Gettysburg campaign that people don't really study is the evolution of the cavalry.
Yeah.
And you look at what from Brandy Station to Aldie to Middleburg to Upperville, all the way up, which culminates in them holding themselves on East Cavalry Fields against Jeb. Now, South Cavalry Field didn't work out too well, but you saw the evolution. So you can look at each campaign and pick something out of it that makes it important, right?
Mhm.
But Tullahoma is a good one. Vicksburg, I think the Vicksburg campaign is still, for the war, is the greatest campaign in
Mhm.
Civil War history for Grant because of what he ultimately did. All Duck River, right?
Yeah.
The DeSoto fiasco, trying to dig that trench around, to
Yeah.
landing at Bruinsburg, to sending Grierson, right, out to Jackson. All that and this is all in real time without real maps.
Yeah.
We're trying to knowing that as like specifically Benjamin Grierson and the Real Horse Soldiers, where Tim Smith tells that great story about
Oh,
that
Tim,
book,
that
right?
Tim Smith's The Real Horse Soldiers is such a good book.
Was you're moving, and the movie kind of does it a disservice that the whole
Yeah.
the John Wayne,
I love the movie. It was one of my mom's favorites.
you know, but
But
when you study that of how good Grierson was. Now, this is a guy who wasn't a military background guy. He was basically poor businessman, failed at almost everything, but he joins the cavalry, and he climbs, and he ends up doing that fantastic raid,
yeah.
and he freaks the hell out of the Confederacy out, because now they don't know what Grant's plan is.
Yeah.
Grant's at Bruinsburg, but now you got this shit going on towards Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Like what the hell? And he was able to do to the Confederacy what Lee did to the Union, which ultimately led to Bristow Station.
Yeah.
With Lee, if you want to take a shot at Meade, you can look at how bad Meade got fooled with the Culpeper V
Mhm.
after Gettysburg and are forced back to Bristow. That's what he did. It's the psychological stuff that makes that campaign really cool.
Yeah. Blowjam had a really good comment here. Would Sickles have done what he did? He was referring to Gettysburg, if he actually had military education instead of being a political general. I sometimes think like, I mean, I do understand why Sickles did what he did, but going back to that military education versus political general, um, and even getting outside of that political general, you look at some of the generals that didn't have a
You talk
military
about his you
education.
talk about his advance up to
Yeah.
Pete George. Again, I mean, well, that depends. Again, it falls back to the Charles Payne map. If that is a real thing, if that's a real thing, okay, then okay, it's black and white. This is what I think we're supposed to do. Meade was considering an offensive attack really throughout the battle. He could flip that to an offensive. So that I don't think it had to do with political versus military. I think he
Mhm.
was trying to ride both sides of the fence. If this guy wants to fight an offensive battle, I need to be in a better place. And again, if the map is true, then Sickles did what he was supposed to do, and there was a
Mhm.
miscommunication. if it's not true, I don't think he woke up, twisted his mustache, and said, "I'm going to screw myself the government today. You know, I think he felt that I think he felt he was doing what was best for his core, and history shows that he got his core destroyed, and the rest of his core turns into a division, which gets pounded at Spotsylvania. That's where they
Yeah.
ended. They did, double chance sweepstakes for them. But because he got his leg lost, he was never going to get court-martialed. You're not going to court-martial a general who lost his leg in battle. So he
No.
avoided that. And he gets the Medal of Honor, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I don't think it made a difference. I think if you had a guy like George Sykes, who was much more incompetent than Sickles
Oh
was, but
God.
he doesn't get credit for that because for different reasons. But I think if it's anybody like that and they're following that map, I think he's doing what I think he's supposed to do. I think the problem with Sickles was he was confused, and I think the
Yeah.
problem was, and that's why he keeps sending back his messenger back five
He's like, is
times.
this okay?
Am I supposed to be doing this? Is this right? And he's like, well, and I think that's what it was. I don't think it was malicious. I think he was trying to follow his orders the best
Yeah.
that he understood them. It wouldn't be the first time a boss and a subordinate had miscommunication.
Yeah.
But because it's Sickles and who he was and his attitude and the way he was, it turns more into a malicious event that he did versus more of a miscommunication event. That's just what I think.
No, I agree. And yeah, he goes to Sickles. They said that decision of Sickles was based on Beryl Chancellorsville issues. I agree. And it wasn't at Hazel Grove. I think it was, and we talked about the episode we did with Hessler, and I've said this before. I think Sickles looked where he was and he's like, Jesus, I'm in almost the same position that Howard was in. I need to like move my ass so I don't get overrun. Because what happened to Howard was in the minds of every corps commander in the AOP, that I think they realized like, geez, this could happen to me.
Yeah,
This
I
could
think the misconception that a lot of people get was he 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 was on Hazel Grove and he was ordered off Hazel Grove. And the perception is he took the peach orchard because he wanted to create a new Hazel Grove and stay there. But
Yeah,
I think you're right. I think the big issue is he didn't want to be on the end.
yeah, yeah. And
But
I
the
think a
but the
lot of
but,
them had I think a lot of them had that in their head. But getting back to the whole like, having military training, having gone to West Point, some of the best generals in the Civil War, the ones that they're good to up there, not saying they're up there with Grant, but some of the good ones, like I'm talking John Brown Gordon, Patrick Clayburn, Blackjack Logan, didn't go to West Point, and they're
Mhm.
good. And I wonder if it's because they're out of that kind of that textbook mentality and they're able to like, well, how can I do this? Because you look at like someone like Beauregard as we call him, he had a tough time breaking away from that textbook. When it happened in Mexico, when I think his commander was Taylor or Scott, they were like, we need to do this. And Beauregard's like, that's not in Germany. You can't do that. Tough time breaking away from that. And I sometimes think like, the ones that went to West Point were awesome, but you have ones that didn't, like John Brown Gordon, that were really good.
No, we've said it before. The people who learn on the fly, Gordon comes to mind specifically, and people like that. You can probably make a case for Granberry, make a case for Clayburn, people like that. Clayburn had military background, but a little bit different. He wasn't a West Point guy.
Yeah.
But versus the died in the bull, the Dennis Mahan, Jomini people.
Mhm.
I can't say Clausewitz because he wasn't translated to English till after the war. But the other ones, it's tough to unlearn. We see it
Mhm.
today. We see it today where people are fixed in their attitudes and they don't want to unlearn. But the same deal. You're told, you know, mass your men shoulder to shoulder. You have your
Yeah.
file closers. You have your artillery, 14, 28 yards apart. The whole deal. Mass your men. But as the war changed, it went from more of a Napoleonic war to what we call more of a
Yeah.
modern war. The better generals are the ones who adapted to that change and
Yeah.
didn't stick with it. And Lee was an old dog trying to learn new tricks with that. He was, and that was the challenge. But it's no
Yeah.
surprise the ones who ultimately did the best are the ones who could adapt through. And
Yeah,
Meade
like
did
Grant.
adapt. Grant, Meade, certainly
Sherman.
the Confederate side, you can make a case for a lot of the people. But that's the reality of this.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, some of them really like, I mean, Granbury's another one that did not go to West Point. He's not studied enough and how good he was. He's one of Claiborne's guys. And he's at Pickett's Mill, he's at Ringgold Gap. he's at Franklin and gets killed at Franklin. Unfortunately, his story is really, really sad, like with his wife and all that, but he's really good. And you look at someone like John Brown Gordon, who's, I would not want to go up to battle against him. He's he's really good. Doesn't go to West Point. I do think though, did you say Clausewitz was the one that wasn't translated?
He wasn't translated until after the war.
Yeah,
So
Beauregard had read him but Beauregard was fluent in spoke French until he was 12 when he had to learn English. And that's he had read him before.
yeah, no, I'm not saying none of them did. I'm saying it
Yeah.
wasn't universally taught in West Point the way
No, it
Dennis
wasn't.
Vahan was, and
No.
and
Jomini.
Jomini,
Yeah.
Jomini was big on the Golden Bridge, all the stuff he taught. But it's again, you're taught a certain way, and you're going to fight that certain way.
Yeah.
You're fighting the same two good armies, two good teams on the field fighting back and forth with the same type of mentality, with the same types of weapons. But the side that adapted better, I forget the number disadvantage and all that stuff, but the side that adapted better. And by the time you got to Overland Campaign, it was for the most part trench warfare. It was.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, the way they're taught at West Point, it's like battles to be fought on these big open fields. Grant, especially, I think one of the reasons that Grant adapted as well as he did is because in the Western theater, he is experiencing terrain that is so, like, it's like, wow, they didn't teach us we had to fight in this shit. You look at something like Lookout Mountain or Missionary Ridge, Battle of Chickamauga, which I know Grant is not at, but Battle of Chickamauga, you've seen that terrain. It's horrendous.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think people who go to like just the Gettysburgs of the world, the Antietam's of the world, you have this kind of this false image of these battlefields being these wide open fields marching across with slow undulations, Mary, going back and forth. But for the most part, most of these battles are fought in woods. Yep. They were fought in terrain. Go to wilderness. Go to all these places. Go to Atlanta. Go to these places and see where they were actually fighting, where you couldn't really utilize your artillery because for the most part you wouldn't fire on something you couldn't see.
You can't use artillery at Pickett's Mill.
Right. And so but I think people assume the Gettysburg people that all the battles were like this, and Chickamauga has some open areas, but for the most part it's in the middle of the woods, all of it.
Yep. Well, you said your analogy of Chickamauga is spot on. It's like a bar fight that each room is different, and it spills from room to room to room.
Yeah.
And 1 minute you're in like this open valley plain, next you're in the woods, the next you're in like the woods and it's got like gigantic hills. Like you look at where Thomas is making that stand on September 20th and the Longstreet's throwing up his guys and they're having to go up these steep hills with tree roots and trees. And you also have the smoke from the guns obscuring your vision. Same thing that happens at Lookout Mountain in November of 63. Same thing. And the guys said at Lookout Mountain, I think we talked about it in our episode, the only way they could see is when the weapons were fired.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the shadows of the other men, and that's kind of how they knew where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. But well, it's almost that time. We're going to jump off. It's almost 12. Getting ready to go. We have things to do today. So why don't we jump off? So we're going to be recording our episode on the Irish Brigade this week. We have to decide when we're going to do it. Whenever you grace me with your presence and decide you want to record this thing.
Probably Friday. But yeah, we will be back next weekend sometime with a Facebook Live. The episode after that will be about Patrick Clayburn. We're going to be announcing our next roundtable soon, and we do have a theme for it this time.
That's right. We decided a theme. And don't forget, one of these days, we're going to set up the book club meeting.
Yes, we are. Yeah. Oh, Freedom Forever is on here. Said, love your show. I learned a lot watching you guys. I don't comment too much, but I'm here watching. Well, thank you.
Oh, cool.
And you don't have to comment. Like, we just love that people come on here, hang out with us.
It's fun talking about this stuff. And it's great that people, it's just, everyone's got opinions. Everyone has a different level of knowledge. No one knows everything. It's always good to we don't do this for the arrogance level of trying to teach anybody anything. We just talk amongst ourselves
and hang out with like-minded,
have fun with it.
Hang out with people.
But we definitely appreciate people listening.
Also on March 15th, MJ mentioned the date and so did Frank. The Manhunt TV series premieres on Apple TV, which is about the hunt for John Wilkes Booth. So be sure to tune into that. as well. I'm sure we'll be talking about that. But yeah, thank you everybody for jumping on with us this weekend or today. This has been awesome. Appreciate the support. Nice to see some new faces on here too.
Yeah, it's always cool. And if you
Yep.
and definitely go support Getty's Gear. My
Yes.
friends at Getty's Gear. If you go there and you buy anything, they give you a free sticker, a Breakfast Club
Yes.
sticker, which is this sticker right here.
Yeah.
So,
And
look
they
out.
also have Jim and Eric's Battle of Gettysburg podcast stickers. So be sure to support them, buy one of their stickers, and also support Civil War Trails as well. They're
Yeah.
awesome. And Emerging Civil War too.
No, there's a lot of good people doing this, and just don't just hold your line, but be open to it, keep an open mind, learn, and enjoy learning. This is a
Yep.
never ending cycle, and there could be a primary source diary that can pop out of someone's attic tomorrow that can change the entire narrative of this thing. That's what's great about it. Is this stuff changes, so this stuff
Yep.
changes. So anyway, had some fun. They talked about our Uncle Dan a little bit. Didn't expect
Yep.
to talk about him today. That was pretty cool.
Yep.
And,
Yep. And yeah, thank you everybody on here for keeping it so positive. That's what is the best, is keeping it positive and just, learning from each other and all that. You guys are awesome.
Anyway, all right. Well, off we go, Mary. We look forward to talking to everybody later. As usual, Mary, the pleasure was all yours. We say it many times. But we'll talk to you all soon. So we'll get that episode done this week, and we'll talk. Have a safe weekend. Enjoy wherever you are. Hit your battlefields. The weather is warming up, Mary. So if you're around, get out to your battlefields. Go out there and enjoy them, and learn as much as you can. All right, off we go, guys. Have a great weekend.
See y'all later. Bye.
So.